We've all experienced some pretty messy moments, but that's life, right? And yet we've often given advice, keep your chin up, stay positive, and even with the best intentions, advice like that can really lead to what's known as toxic positivity. And joining me today on Current, Dr. Neeta Bhushan. She wrote the book, That Sucked, Now What? How to Embrace the Joy in Chaos and Find Magic in the Mess. Dr. Neeta, thank you for joining us.
Oh, Natalie, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So let's get right into this. Why is it so hard to get back up when you're down? And how can we all embrace what you call is the suck?
Right. Yeah. So, I think we haven't been taught a lot of the strategies and the tools when we were younger, right? I remember as a little girl, my parents always told me, and they were from immigrant backgrounds from Philippines and India, but this is kind of across the board that you're not supposed to cry. Don't cry, be a big girl. And so that when something really big or monumental happens, we cocoon, we shut down, we restrict and contract. And instead of acknowledging and saying, you know what, actually that sucked. And now what? And it doesn't mean that we're in that victim spiral, because I talk a lot about that in the book, the difference between victim and victor, but actually being vulnerable in sharing and acknowledging the pain of that moment.
Now, one of the things that you have is this 5-stage framework to embrace the possibilities when things aren't going so great. What are those steps?
Yeah, so it's called the Fly Forward framework. And many times, for example, when you have lost a job or when you got a diagnosis, a health scare, that is the falling stage. That means that something like a life initiation, a rock bottom moment happened. And then we get into the rising stage. And the rising stage is step 2, where we understand that we probably need to, and that's actually the ignition stage. That's step 2. But the ignition stage is when we realize we have to make a change. Well, okay, I've got to get a new job, or I have to do something with my health to take care of this. And then we get into that rising stage. And that's the little bit of that new self-discovery, that curiosity, which then leads us into magnifying. And magnifying stage, you're still kind of skeptical about things. Is this really going to work? But we're actually embracing the newness. And finally, we get into the thriving stage. And the thriving stage is really all about paying it forward for other people.
And what about your own life? When it comes to this book, was any of that sparked by your own life experiences, and how many of those?
Oh, wow. Natalie, I think this has been a culmination of my entire life. I had some pretty rock bottom moments. I mean, I lost my mother, my brother, and my father. And so during those seasons of grief and, tremendous, awful loss, before I was 19 years old, I didn't have a lot of those tools. So that toxic positivity that you mentioned, that was one of my coping mechanisms early on, until I hit another rock bottom moment a decade later, which was getting into my first marriage and then divorce. And then shortly after that, really kind of culminating all of these events, I entered motherhood. And there is no way that you cannot embrace the magic and the messy, and really sometimes the juxtaposition of conflicting emotions, the joy and the grief and the sadness and the sleepless nights, where I really wanted to give agency and voice to so many people to say, you know what, that sucked, now what? And I talk about a lot of the tools on how to really normalize and help embrace those sucky moments.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that could use this that maybe don't have the framework yet, and they will get your book and read it. Do you have any examples to give where you've actually seen the effects of this, where others have kind of turned those negative moments into their life, into these changing experiences?
Yes. So there's a chapter that I call the magical moments that sucked. And we all have them, right? Maybe you're watching this right now and you're listening and you're thinking, well, I don't even know if that's me, but I'll give you this one exercise that you can actually do, where you can make a list of all of the things that were sucky, and you can go down that list, and maybe it was a divorce, a breakup, an unexpected loss, a betrayal by a friend. And how many of those breadcrumbs led you to where you are today, and really connect those dots. And right now, this is a fantastic exercise, but I want you to actually take 3 months probably in the future, or maybe even a year later, and look back at those and see how many of those did that breakup actually lead you to find your next love of your life. Like my rock bottom moment of my marriage actually led me to find my co-pilot and the love of my life, my husband Ajit, and now we have two amazing kids. And so to really be able to take some of those challenging moments, those setbacks, and see what was the gift in them. And sometimes it's not revealed, which is why in That Sucked, Now What, I actually give a lot of those tools to help you reframe this in your daily lives, no matter how big or how small the traumatic event is.
Just some really solid advice. Dr. Neeta Bhushan, thank you for joining us. You guys go out and get her book, That Sucked, Now What, as she just mentioned, and get this skill set. We appreciate your time here today.